Asa, this has to be something that you are dead certain about. There needs to be no error in what you're saying. Are you absolutely positive? Delius shouted, as he grasped Asa by the shoulders, looking her directly in the eyes. Yes, Delius, I'm sure. How? How can you know something like that? Delius asked as he stepped away for a moment, turning around and putting his hands on his head in frustration. What the hell does this even mean? What's gonna happen? Well, it's gonna have a baby, obviously. Yeah, I know that. But how? The sheer mechanics of it are mind-boggling, not just the idea of, I don't recall anywhere in our legends of our planet having an impromptu rendezvous with another one. I mean, how can you even know that, Asa? Explain it. Make it make sense, please, Delia said, completely overwhelmed with the idea. Look, my first curiosity was arise when we got the transmission from the worshippers of the Solari, the knowledge that they had gathered about the deity beasts, once again as they refer to them in their texts. My suspicion was first aroused when I noticed that there was a differential in the size of their planet and the size of yours. Yours is actually bigger, Delius, a fair amount bigger, nearly twice its size. The technology that the worshippers of the Solari use is very advanced. They actually have the capability to take detailed scans of worlds far exceeding our own, even enough to penetrate the extreme conditions of the deity beasts and their formation. So we went ahead and had them take a scan of Hagara, and boy did we get details. We now have an intricate understanding of Hagara's anatomy like we never did before. On all surface level appearance, Hagara and the Solarans' home world basically seem identical, except for the differential in size. But as I pored over the records, I began to notice very different things about their world in comparison to yours. For instance, its rate of movement. Its rate of movement? Yes, the Solari have been tracking the movements of their world through several systems. Just like Hagara, once every now and again, their planet wakes up, eats the system it's in, and then moves on, gathering resources in order to construct a new system around it. Let that system build and grow until it wakes up and eats it. They even tracked it from place to place, recording the directions it travels, what sort of things it heads towards. They can basically read wherever it's going to go the moment it wakes up, and know where it was before it established the system that it's currently in, which is exceptionally helpful. I'll explain why later. But for the moment, the thing that struck me was that by comparing the records that they kept of their world to Hagara's current position, I was able, through no small amount of effort and research, to backtrack Hagara's movements, where it traveled to and why, and even the time frame in which it did, which required, believe me, a lot, and I mean a lot of number crunching. I spent months crunching those numbers, and in the end, I found a substantial difference between their world and your world, which only raised my curiosity more. By all accordance and appearance, your world is far more active than theirs, moving and waking more than twice as often as their planet wakes up, which is actually a great boon to them. If you guys have to go through 3 generations before the planet wakes up and decides to gobble everything up and move on, they get closer to 7 before their planet does the same, more than twice as often. Not only that, but the amount of resources gathered between them is drastically different, with Hagara gathering nearly 50% more planet, stars, and material than the world inhabited by the Solari. At first, I thought it might simply be a differential in age, One's bigger after all. Perhaps it was older, and thus requires more sustenance. But there was still an itch in the back of my head that something was amiss. So I kept digging, looking into all of the information that we gathered from the Solari. And in that information, they also had detailed information regarding their world's energy requirements. They actually can read the flow of core radiation that swirls across the planet and is absorbed by it, which was actually a startling turn of discovery for me. I originally thought your people's energy was simply utilized to sustain your existence, or perhaps fend off the difference in temporal mechanics. But in actuality, it's being absorbed by the planet itself, which blew my theory out of the water. While that did upset me, the new information was more than compensation for it. Because, just like everything else, I discovered that Hagara is actually absorbing a great deal more of your core radiation than the home planet of the Solari. 75% more, to be exact. In terms of population, your planets are actually fairly close, with a differential of only a dozen or so people in terms of overall population. So why the massive difference in the amount of radiation they absorb? In terms of size differential, its size simply didn't explain the amount of energy that it was taking. According to the radiation readouts, the flow that it was absorbing from the population here on Hagara was far greater, which has most likely been weakening your people substantially. But all of these just beg the question of why. Why was Hagara so much hungrier than its counterpart? Why did it need to eat more, both in terms of the physical material it devoured from the planets and stars, down to the core energy that it absorbed from the races inhabiting it? And so I started digging into its anatomy, looking through the detailed scans that they gathered in order to try to suss out an answer. And that's when I found it. The second heartbeat. At first I thought it might be a biological thing, simply that the creatures have a secondary heart. But no matter how many times I checked over the scans of the Solari's home world, there was nothing. No second heartbeat. Even comparing the locations, there was nothing close. So we had them run scans one more time, this time being more precise on the location, focusing everything in towards the central location of the second heartbeat. And that's when we could finally see it clearly. The infant inside. The unborn world lying inside of your world. An infant planet. The moment we saw it, everything suddenly made sense. Why Hagara awakens more often than their world. Why it eats more. Why it demands more of your radiation. It's not just feeding itself. It's trying to feed the child that it's pregnant with. That's why it's demanding so much radiation, eating so many worlds. It's trying to sustain the child as well. But therein lies our problem, Delius. It's not working. Your homeworld, Hagara, seems to be taking as much radiation as it possibly can from the people here on the planet, and devouring as much material as it can. But it can't keep up with the demand. The child's life signs are weakening. And the thing I can't understand is why. I mean, is the energy that it's taking from you really not enough? No, Mozarko said as she interrupted Asa's little scientific ramble that had everyone in the village aghast. Just as with any living being, the requirements for pregnancy massively increase what the parent has to take in. It is a great burden. The energy that Delius's home world, the deity beast that he lives upon, sustains itself on, is not enough. Even taking the maximum amount it possibly can from the race that lives upon its back isn't enough to feed a growing child along with itself. Hagara's own body is absorbing far more of the radiation. To be quite honest, The deity beasts already sustain on as little as they possibly can. Basically, they're on a starvation diet. The energy that we give them is enough to sustain them, but only by a very slim margin. Sustaining a child, well, quite frankly, I'm surprised there's still a child at all. But there may still be hope yet. This is an opportunity. What? What are you talking about? Delia said, looking towards Mozuko, unsure of what she was referring to. Look, my planet is becoming overpopulated. Your planet is about to give birth. This could solve both our problems. All we need to do in order to stabilize the infant is to feed Hagara enough radiation. The physical matter it ingests is enough to cover basic nutrients, but the energy requirements is what is weakening the child. Your people simply cannot provide enough. But if a large portion of my people were to come here, ones that have lived off the surface and whose core radiation levels have risen back to normal, if we travel here to the locations in which the crystals have been implanted in Hagara, we can funnel massive amounts of core radiation into them. Basically, give the child a booster shot. Feed Hagara so much excess information, energy, that it has to run through to the child. This will alleviate the burden. It's possible that this could even push back the awakening of your Hagara. What? Delia said. Are you sure? No, I'm not positive, but it is at least probable that the reason that it wakes so often is because it requires excess energy that it cannot get from you, and thus it devours more, trying to fill the gap. If my people come here in a large enough amount and funnel our core radiation into the crystals of your world, we may just save the child and keep your world nice and asleep for a while longer. So, you'd actually do that? Help us save Hagara's offspring. Yes, I would. I would personally travel to my planet as quickly as possible and see to it that I brought back more than enough to sustain this child. However, this would not be a free gift. What you're asking for would take a great toll on my people and weaken a great number of us. So, what we would ask in exchange would be the child itself. If you are willing to surrender the offspring, then my people will help. What? You can't be serious. Just give it up? Why not? It's not as if your people can sustain it. Without us, it's a goner anyways. And my people need another world. There is no doubt that this offspring will grow to be a planet in and of itself, and serve as a fine new homeworld, once it begins to grow into its own. Which, according to our legends, should be quite quickly. I'm led to believe that after the deity beasts reproduce, the offspring grows to a full size rather rapidly. That they become quite voracious after born, devouring quite a bit before moving on. But therein also lies a little bit of a problem. Once this Hagara, your deity beast, awakens and gives birth to this creature, this infant deity beast, it will most likely be very hungry and unlikely to take heed to any orders given. It will begin devouring whatever is nearby. In other words, the system that you now currently inhabit will be its sustenance. That is, if it is to give birth soon. Delius, based on the scans that we took, there's probably not much time until Mama pops, if you get my drift. I'd say there's no question about it. It's most likely going to happen right here in this star system, which means that we can't put off the birth. It's a choice. If we save the child, every planet and star in this system is destroyed. Done for. But if we try to neglect the child, every planet in this system gets to live at the expense of Hagara's offspring. Quite possibly one of the last of its kind in all the universe.